Hello everyone, welcome to my channel on understanding finance and sports. My name is Faisal Hasnain and today we'll talk about the major sport event insurances. So let's provide a bit of background first. Insurances are an essential part of the risk management process and financial safeguards for a major sports event because despite excellent planning and detailed planning, things can go wrong and unexpected incidents can happen. Now, you can't stop some incidents, especially if it's an act of God, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But what you can do is to protect yourself financially if such an event occurs, even though there may be a small chance of it occurring. So what you're doing by taking out insurances is to seek protection against financial loss or harm to the event. Now, in order to highlight areas of financial exposures, you need to conduct a risk assessment and see where things can go wrong. And here, when we are talking about a major sports event, we are talking about something like the Olympics or the FIFA Football World Cup or the Rugby World Cup, an event of that stature and magnitude where there's a lot at risk, both financially and otherwise. So what insurance does is that it reduces the financial risk in case of adverse and unexpected circumstances. And insurances should be part of the contingency planning for every sports event. Now, one can say, what's the biggest risk in having an event? Or what is the biggest risk to the event? And most people will agree that the biggest risk for the event organizers, which could be the International Olympic Committee or FIFA, is that the event is cancelled completely. So, if an event is cancelled completely, that is a huge loss in terms of money to the organizers and to other people. Now let's look at the type of losses that can take place if sports events such as a FIFA World Cup is cancelled. For a start, if the event isn't held, you'll obviously get no revenues from that event. The revenues from any event are actually contingent on you hosting that event, completing that event, and fulfilling all your obligations. Another area of exposure financially is those expenses which you have incurred in trying to put that event together and which, if the event is not held for any reason, are irrecoverable. These are the expenses that you would recover as part of your revenues from the event. And if you get no revenues and you've already been planning that event and putting infrastructure in place, then those expenses which you have incurred might be completely lost, irrecoverable. If an event is cancelled, you will obviously lose the profits that you were expecting to make from that event. There could be a situation whereby you have used part of the advanced revenues from that event in order to pay for certain expenses. So, for example, you may need to refund revenues which people have given you in advance, such as advance booking of tickets, concessions which you've granted or the organizers have granted for food and beverage outlets to be present during the event. Those are advance revenues which you've received, and you may have spent that on planning for the event. And therefore, if that event is cancelled, you will have to refund all that advance revenue. Then there are various additional expenses that can take place if the event, let us say, is not completely cancelled, but if it's postponed or if it's relocated. So an example of additional expenses if an event is postponed or rescheduled is that you need to keep all the staff on until that event is held. Now, if that is 6 months down the line, that is a further 6 months salary that you will have to incur until that event is finally held. Or if the event is relocated from the venue where it was supposed to be to another venue, then there is certainly going to be expenses associated with that as well. Now, let's have a look at sports event cancellation insurance. We did say that cancellation is the biggest risk to a major event, to any event, as a matter of fact. So, what is cancellation insurance? It's part of the insurances that protects the organizers against business interruption, cancellation of the event, abandonment of the event, curtailment of the event, postponement of the event, rescheduling of the event, and relocation of the event. So it is basically some sort of business interruption, whether that leads to a complete cancellation or it leads to a curtailment, postponement, or rescheduling. Now, event organizers such as FIFA and the IOC will purchase cancellation insurance to cover losses resulting from adverse events that impact the staging of the event. For example, if a major event is cancelled, for example, due to an earthquake, and it's not possible to reschedule the event, the insurance policy will cover the losses, obviously in accordance with the policy that is taken out. We'll talk about that a little bit later. As mentioned in the previous slide, the insurance cover can include spectator ticket refunds. Those are advance revenues that you've received, and vendor payments that the event organizers will owe the vendors, including the costs associated with making those refunds. Now, cancellation insurance, if it's properly taken out, should include events due to force majeure. And by that we mean things outside of the organizer's control, such as they call it the acts of God, natural disasters, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Now, what type of event cancellation insurances can there be? What can you do to protect yourself in case an event is cancelled? What kind of insurances can you actually take out? So, for a start, you can take out revenue insurance. So, for example, if you're having a major event and you're due to be receiving revenues of, let's say, $10 million, in case that event is cancelled, you won't receive that $10 million. You can take out an insurance policy that will pay for the revenues that you would have received had that event taken place. We mentioned about expenses that may not be recoverable in case the event is cancelled. The organizers can take out insurances that cover the expenses that have been incurred. You can take out insurances for partial cancellation, event curtailment. Now, this normally happens if some matches are cancelled, for example, due to the weather. So if you're supposed to have an event with 10 matches, and if 3 of them are rained off and are not able to be held, then in that case, the revenues and expenses incurred from the cancellation of those matches can potentially be recovered from the insurance companies. The insurance company will list the circumstances leading to an event cancellation for them to respond to that particular occurrence. Now that could be terrorism. An event is cancelled due to some kind of a terror attack. Let's say due to a fire, in case war breaks out, or who knows, there's a revolution in the country. So these are all sort of circumstances which will be specified in the insurance policy that one can either opt in for or opt out for. The policy should include force majeure insurance, acts of God, which covers natural disasters such as earthquake, floods, weather concerns, global pandemic, for example. And in taking out such a policy, the policy holder must consider the exclusions in the policy. For example, what is not covered. So we reiterate that cancellation insurance is the most important insurance cover that should be in place for every major sports event. It's part of the plan on how to deal with a doomsday scenario. And as there may be hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions at stake, it is very important to understand the insurance policy completely and to be certain of when and where the policy will respond and where it will not. Insurance companies will require a number of factors and procedures to take place before they approve the payment. This can become quite complicated and technical, but simply to mention here that it's very important to know the events that come under the policy and the events which lie outside of the policy. Now we'll look at an example in the next slide. Let's consider Wimbledon 2020. Obviously that event was cancelled and it was widely publicized that that cancellation was covered by cancellation insurance. Now, following the SARS outbreak in 2003, the Wimbledon organizers took out infectious diseases insurance. And this cover was part of their event cancellation insurance. So, following SARS, the Wimbledon organizers specifically included a cancellation of the Wimbledon event due to an infectious disease. It has been reported that this was one of the soundest financial decisions made by the Wimbledon Club's Finance Committee, the All England Club's Finance Committee. Because obviously insurance costs money, you need to pay an annual premium, and they paid 1.5 million sterling in premiums every year since 2003. Obviously, in 2020, due to COVID-19, Wimbledon was cancelled for the first time since World War II. And it has been reported that the insurance companies will pay Wimbledon more than 174 million sterling in compensation. This is the figure that has been reported in the All England Club's annual report. So, despite the cancellation of Wimbledon last year, it has been reported that the All England Club will remain largely financially unaffected. That's the power of taking out cancellation insurance. Now, as opposed to this, the US and French Open tennis tournaments did not have such a cover, which is why they were so desperate for their events to take place. Otherwise, they would have sustained huge losses. So, lesson to be learned from the organizers of Wimbledon. Their prudence really paid off. An example, we've concentrated on event cancellation insurance, but some examples of the sort of insurances that can also be in place for sports events. Starting with general liability coverage, this is a general overall umbrella type of an insurance policy that covers basic liabilities to other third parties for bodily injury or property damage caused by the insured. In our case, we are talking about the sports event. Sports accident insurance. The insurance covers losses resulting from accidents and personal injuries to spectators, volunteers, and employees during the sports event. Obviously, a spectator could be hit by, for example, a ball. Football can be smashed in his face from close range, or let's say a tennis ball hits a spectator and there is some kind of a freak accident where the spectator is seriously injured. In that case, the spectator may actually sue the organizers for injury, and the insurance company will then respond and settle the liability. Then something that's again fairly common in sports events is prize indemnity insurance. And this is used in offering a sporting event on-field achievements, such as a golf hole-in-one, football field goal from one's own half, or if a goalkeeper scores a field goal, a basketball half-court shot, plus spectator contests such as catching a ball. So, for example, the organizers could say that we will present any golfer who makes a hole-in-one with a motor car, a Ferrari. And if a golfer is successful in getting a hole-in-one, then he gets that Ferrari and the insurance company actually pays for it. So you've insured yourself against, you've created a competition amongst the players, and then you've taken out an insurance policy against that event happening. That could, for example, also be if a player scores a field goal from his own half. You could say any player who does that gets a motor car. Again, the insurance company will respond if that event actually takes place. And there are many other insurances as well. So thank you so much for watching and hopefully enjoying this short presentation. I hope to see you all again very soon. In the meanwhile, thank you so much, and this is Faisal signing out.